WorldDAB, the global industry network for DAB digital radio, the free-to-air backbone for radio's digital future, bringing together industry experts from across the radio ecosystem, regulators, broadcasters, network operators, receiver and auto manufacturers and solution providers, providing knowledge and expertise on all aspects of implementing DAB digital radio. Our vision is that every person enjoys digital radio, on the move, at home or at work, with DAB at the heart of the listening experience. WorldDAB, collaborative, authoritative, trusted.
Hello and welcome back to the second half of today's conference. Hope you enjoyed our slightly extended break. We were distracted by the rather beautiful views behind us. I know a lot of you online are saying that it must be a green screen. No, I promise you, that is actually there. The River Thames is behind us. You can see the House of Parliament. And just over there is Battersea Power Station. It really is magnificent. But welcome back. And as we mentioned before lunch, it is now time to unveil for the very first time the findings of that major study on car buyers' attitudes to radio. It was carried out by Edison Research. But before we do unveil the research findings, please, just a reminder to post your questions in the Q&A for all of our speakers here today, because we do want to hear from you. But joining me now on the sofa for this session are Lawrence Harrison, Director of Automotive Partnerships at Radio Player Worldwide. And back with us once again is Patrick Hannon, President of WorldDAB. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
This is a rather exciting moment because we're about to hear some research that hasn't been unveiled to anybody else yet. But Patrick, can you tell us a bit more about why WorldDAB actually commissioned this research?
Well, as I mentioned this morning, one of the things that we really want to do is to make sure that the car makers fully appreciate the consumer attitudes towards broadcast radio and broadcast digital radio in particular. So that's really what we wanted to do. And to give it credibility, we wanted to make sure that it was really international, so North America, Europe and Australia. And we partnered with Radio Player, with Lawrence, and we've had the support from the National Association of Broadcasting in the States, with Xperi, and with Commercial Radio Australia. And the idea is to create a joined-up story that we can take to car manufacturers and say, this is what's going on. Right, OK.
Well, Lawrence, welcome. Thanks for joining us this morning. So why was it important for you, for Radio Player, to partner with WorldDAB on this research?
Well, for Radio Player, I mean, this is just a vitally important piece of research looking at car buyers and what they think about radio in the dashboard. I mean, we don't think that the automotive industry does much, if any, of this kind of research. So for car manufacturers, this is going to be a really valuable insight into what their customers think about radio, and in particular broadcast radio and DAB. And I guess in the future, our hope is that the car manufacturers can use some of these insights when they're planning their radio systems in the future, which we firmly believe needs to be hybrid radio with broadcast at its heart, and it needs to look great and have fantastic features. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what Tom says.
Me too. I am very intrigued, particularly as one of my jobs is automotive journalist, so I'm particularly excited to see what the research thinks. So without further ado, please let me introduce you to Tom Webster, Senior Vice President of Edison Research, joining us from the States, so it's an early start for him. But Tom, over to you for the research findings.
Cheers. Thank you very much. And it's somewhere between 2 in the morning and 5 in the morning here. I'm not sure. No, I think it's about 7, thanks to the vagaries of daylight savings time. We were thrilled to be approached to do this project. One thing that we know from our share of ear research in the United States is that broadcast radio is still an incredibly thriving part of the media ecosystem. And to have a story like this to tell, I think, is significant, and we're pleased to be associated with telling it. One of the things that we did with this survey is we combined qualitative and quantitative research. I won't spend a ton of time on the methodology. You'll be unpacking this for the weeks to come. But we did a significant series of studies across 6 different countries. And in all 6 countries, we looked at people who had either just bought a new car, 2018 or newer, or were going to buy one in the next 12 months. So we're really looking here at the wheelhouse of car manufacturers, recent and prospective car buyers. And so we did a survey of at least 1,000 people in France, Italy, Germany, the UK, the US, and Australia. We also did a series of qualitative interviews where we actually talked to some of these consumers And I'm going to show you a little bit of that video now and in their own language, how they feel about radio. So the first thing to know about all of this is that most people listen to a lot of radio. The first question we ask people is, how often do you typically listen to radio? And in all 6 countries, you'll see that the at least weekly is well over 80% and certainly over 90% in most countries. So radio is still a vibrant and thriving part of everybody's day-to-day life. We also ask people, do you typically listen to the radio in a car or vehicle? And amongst those radio listeners, again, you can see that the numbers here are all quite high. There is obviously going to be a lot of news that comes out about this survey, and a lot of that news is going to revolve around a single number, an average perhaps of these 6 countries, and those averages you're going to see are quite high. But today I've chosen to show you all 6 countries individually for a lot of these data, because to me, as a researcher, what's fascinating about these data is that the regard for radio, the extremely high positive regard for radio, and especially its importance in the car, is high in all 6 countries. And when you see 6 very different countries moving in lockstep like that, the French agreeing with the Italians, agreeing with the Germans, and so on about something like this, then it's, I think, a remarkable research observation to see. So one of the other questions that we asked is, what are the top sources that you want in a car or vehicle in terms of audio? And we threw the kitchen sink at them here. And what we did was aggregate the top 5. And again, if you look across here in all 6 countries at the top, amongst recent car buyers, radio was most often cited as the top audio source that was wanted in the vehicle. And that's given all of the other options that are currently available, the current technology, USB, Bluetooth, et cetera. Radio was still the number 1 most cited option here in terms of what people wanted in a car. That's for recent car buyers. If you look now at prospective car buyers, it's really the same story. If you go across the top here, again, significant study, all 6 countries, radio was the most cited source in terms of what people wanted in a car or vehicle. Well, we asked people why they felt that way. We've certainly established that radio is popular, radio is used, radio is wanted and desired in the car, and not just a little. But we asked people to consider some statements about radio and how they felt about the medium, and we'll get to the car in just a moment. But a couple of things to note here, and really this is, I think, one of the key findings of the whole study, is that people think that radio should be standard in a car, right? Radio is something that people are used to, certainly. So they may or may not get excited about it as a piece of kind of new technology because it's an expectation. They expect to have it in a new car. It would be odd for it not to be in a new car. We also saw that radio is certainly top of mind for people in terms of it's something they would miss if they couldn't receive it in their car. And they would really miss having radio in their car or vehicle. They would miss having their favorite station. And these are very high numbers. Again, look across all 6 countries. You'll see most of these numbers are in the 90s, if not the high 80s, in terms of people that are agreeing with these statements. And again, these are people that typically listen to the radio in a car or vehicle, which is the overwhelming majority of the sample in all 6 countries. So why do people feel this way? Why is radio so important in the car? Well, for many people, it's the first thing they do when they get in the car. And let's hear from some listeners about exactly why that is.
Obviously, I'm making sure that we're all buckled in and everything is done properly. I check the mirrors, and then I relax and I just put the radio on.
So it's seatbelt, heater or cooling, and radio.
Je mets ma ceinture, je démarre le moteur parce que je mets toujours ma ceinture avant et j'allume la radio.
Turn the car on. I'll probably turn my radio on.
Once I make sure I'm about to drive off, I usually pop on the radio.
Today I did turn on my radio.
Oh, I turn on the radio.
Accendo la radio.
Accendo l'autoradio.
Je mets l'autoradio et le GPS.
I usually turn on the radio because I need music.
I do switch on the radio, and I mostly listen to the local radio station that's focused on Bavaria.
I would probably put on Radio 4, which is my favorite radio station, I suppose.
If I'm at home, typically it'll already be on my kind of preferred radio station. If I'm away somewhere and perhaps that's not available, I'll typically still access that radio station through my phone.
people all across the world saying that the radio is the first thing that they switch on when they get in their car. For this project, I had to brush up my rusty French skills and probably my rusty English skills as well. Now, one thing about these consumers is that they have access to other technologies. When we ask people if they typically listen to audio in their car through a mobile device, the answers here generally average in the 40s, starting with Germany at 34 and all the way up to 50% in the US. People have access to these technologies. And I think the story that sometimes gets told in the press is that these are replacement technologies. They're supplemental technologies. These things are used in conjunction with radio, and radio still remains a vibrant choice for people. When we ask these people, those exact people who say that they do use their mobile device to listen to audio in the car, what do they listen to most often in the car? Even amongst those people, in 5 of the 6 countries, the majority of people said that broadcast radio was what they listened to most in the car, and by a lot, generally between 6 and 7 out of 10. The exception here is the US, but the US is the great outlier with satellite radio at 19% there, which again is a linear over-the-top radio experience, though it's delivered by satellite. So even with those consumers that have access to those choices, have access to that technology, it is in fact broadcast radio that they turn to most often. Now, where do people typically listen to the radio most often? The car, again, remains, these are, of course, recent and prospective car buyers. They're in cars. And as a result, the radio in the car is extremely important. The car, for most of these countries, is the plurality of listening for radio, Germany here being the one exception. Now, we asked another series of agree and disagree statements to kind of get to the heart about why people feel the way that they do about radio. And some of these are really, really key. So I want to focus on a couple of them. First of all, radio is an important source of information in times of crisis. It helps people stay up to date with what's going on in the world. But even beyond sort of the informative characteristics, it keeps you company. It helps to keep you in a good mood. And again, this is across all 6 countries, and you can see these numbers are all quite high. We've put in green sort of the top 3 or the tied for top 3 amongst a lot of these. So these are extremely high perceptions amongst prospective and recent car buyers that radio doesn't just keep you informed, it keeps you in a good mood. It helps to keep you company. And here's another key observation, and it's at the bottom of this particular list, but you look at the numbers and they're all in the majority here. They're all extremely high agreement, even still. You would not listen to your favorite radio station if you could only listen online. And we thought this is a very interesting perception and interesting observation. Again, numbers here all in the majority, though it's at the bottom of this list. And so we wondered why that might be. And one of the things that we learned as we were looking at these data is that people find it easy to listen to the radio in a car. It is part of the car experience that we've kind of nailed over the years, right? It's very easy to listen to radio. It gives you a better listening experience in the car. You rarely get gaps in audio was another one. And again, with nearly half of the sample across all countries already being familiar with using technology such as attaching their mobile phone to the car, they have experience in these things. They have experience with using the mobile phone in the car. They have experience with using online and internet technology in the car. And though it often works, and though it does provide an alternative experience, what these consumers are telling us is that radio works. It's easy to use when you're driving. It provides a pleasant listening experience, and people don't get gaps in audio. And another thing that's kind of interesting about that gaps in audio part is the acknowledgement that there are indeed things like buffering, and there is indeed a concern about using mobile data in particular, and the costs associated with that. You see here, again, in the high 80s or 90s across all 6 countries, people agree you listen to radio in a car or vehicle because it's free. And that is a not insignificant driver in all of this, right? It is a free service that is easy to use in the car, and it just works. And even more specifically, you listen to radio in a car or vehicle because it doesn't use your mobile data plan. This is one of the questions that we probed in our qualitative research. So I'm going to show you one last video before we kind of wrap up with what I think is really the biggest finding of all from this study. But this is how people feel about using mobile data versus radio in their
Per
car.
me credo sia, diciamo, imprescindibile, insomma.
Radio is it's simpler. You don't have to play something or think about what you want to listen to. They decide for you.
You have the chance to listen to something interesting just randomly.
So I like in the car to be a little bit lazy and just get this selected by someone else.
You don't have to do anything. You just turn on your car and turn it on. The other options, you got to sync it up or plug it in or download or put an app on.
You have these professionals who sort through and find new music and tell you about the news and tell you about other stuff. So, and it's nice to feel part of a community of people who are all listening to the same thing as well.
E rispetto alle altre opzioni magari mi propone anche delle cose che io non sarei andata ad ascoltare di mio. Quindi magari mi fa anche scoprire cose nuove e poi mi piace, uso pochissimo la televisione, molto molto poco, quindi anche i giornali radio mi aiutano a rimanere aggiornata, però senza tutta quella fuffa mediatica che mi becco invece con la TV.
Tandis que l'avantage du comment ça s'appelle de la radio, c'est que voilà, les nouvelles vous sont données donc en temps réel, etc., sans que j'ai besoin d'aller la chercher.
De l'information, c'est principalement pour ça que j'écoute la radio.
Listen to music which I don't know yet, which maybe is new or something I haven't heard of before. So it gives me something, possibility for new music.
But radio is a good way also just keeping up to date with what's new and current, because if you just listen to your own stuff all the time, you don't really know what else is coming.
We like to listen to the radio because we tend to hear things that maybe might not be topics that we would normally think about, so it stretches us rather than just continuing to have the same conversations. We keep growing.
I think there's a problem for us culturally at the moment is that we return to the things that we know and we're not challenged by unexpected media. When we go switch on our computer, we sort of go around a little routine of checking all our Facebook and our LinkedIn and these things, and then we sort of like our familiar stuff. And so to be challenged like that by a radio station that you don't have control over, for me is one of the aspects that I enjoy, and it's part of my routine. I listen, driving in the car gives me a chance to sort of not do anything else, so this is part of my routine.
Last couple of data points here that I really want to close with. And these are really, I think, this is really the highlight of the study, I think. Amongst recent car buyers, we asked them, suppose that the car or vehicle that you recently purchased or leased did not have a radio. How would that have affected your likelihood to purchase it? And you look here across all the countries, and I know in some of the data that's going to be released, we've combined the much less likely and the somewhat less likely. As a researcher, I love to look at the much less likely, because these are people that had the option for the more polite choice of somewhat less likely, and they instead said much less likely, and that exceeded 40% in all countries. But across the board, people say that they were less likely to purchase that car if it did not have a radio in it, well over 80%, and that is true of recent car buyers, and importantly for car manufacturers, that's also true of prospective car buyers. Again, you look across at the much less likely numbers across all 6 countries, and they range from 40% up into the 50s, say they would be much less likely. Combine that with the somewhat less likely, again, those are all extremely high numbers. So that is a really quick sort of tour du stats of this project. I think the bottom line here is that radio is an expectation for people. Radio does exactly what they want it to while they're driving, which is to be easy to use, to be free, to be entertaining, to be informative, to be a companion, and to be standard. Thank you, and back to you.
Wow, thank you, Tom. I mean, that was really, truly quite fascinating. I think some very compelling stats that you shared with us. And, perhaps what stood out for me was just the consistency across the market and across the different age groups as well on, just how important broadcast radio really is to listeners, particularly, of course, when they're in their car. Now, we will be catching up with you a little bit later, Tom, so don't go anywhere. gentlemen, Lawrence, Patrick, what are your first impressions hearing those stats? Was it kind of in line of what you expected, or were there a few things that took you by surprise?
I'll go first. For me, actually, when I sort of take a step back and think, well, what have I just heard? Actually, the first thing I remember is less the statistics, and it's the people talking about what they were doing. You know, the human stories, and I go, oh my God, you know, that could be me. I don't always listen to Radio 4, but sometimes I listen to Radio 4. And you know what they were saying about the content, the unexpected, the new the news, the new content. So that was, frankly, that was super compelling. That story, and I think that getting that message across to all of us. Because we're very much an industry, industry groupings, but actually remembering who the end user is absolutely critical. And then you have one statistic, and it was interesting the way that Tom played it. The bit about will you still buy a car if it doesn't have a radio? And you could say and he made the point. 80% said that they would be less likely, but he was more interested in the 42, I think was it 42%,
exactly.
who said they were much less likely.
Yeah,
and I think that is really important. And we just need, it's a sort of, it's a mixture of sort of the soft stuff, the qualitative, and then the hammer blow with that message. I'll put that delicately. But that's the message we need to convey. And that, for me, was the main takeaway.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's right. I mean, when you do a study like this, you kind of hold your breath, right? Because you don't know what's going to come back. And we'd done some similar research 5 years ago. And what's incredible, frankly, is that the results are broadly similar and so compelling. You've got over 80% of people are less likely to buy a car without a radio. 90% want broadcast radio to be standard feature. So I think if you're a car manufacturer, if you're in the product marketing team of a car manufacturer and you're seeing this study, you've got to make sure that broadcast radio is at the heart of a brilliant kind of radio button experience. Lots of things in there from the consumers talking about, I just want to get in, it's easy, I press the radio button and it's there and it's ready to go. So those are the kind of key headlines for me, but it's a great presentation.
Yeah, it really was fascinating. I think it's kind of a dream as well, isn't it? It's when you can see that 90% of people are using your product on a weekly basis.
No, but we know that, and consistently all the surveys. And do you know how many people listen to the radio? Practically everybody. Go, really? And they go, yes. And how much they listen to, and on average, I mean, it varies by country, but 20 hours a week is kind of the average. And people go, really? I say, yes. And but those are the dry statistics. It's the bringing it to life, that's where I think this survey and this research. It really takes a step forward to me.
Well, we're going to get into the details. I know you've got some questions for Tom in a moment, but first we're actually going to hear what the world's largest car manufacturer, Volkswagen, makes of those findings. And joining us now is Martin Koch from CARIAD, who's responsible for the development of entertainment and car functions within Volkswagen's infotainment systems, which of course are then being applied to VW, to Audi, to Porsche, Bentley, Skoda and Seat cars. So over to you guys.
Martin, hello, can you hear us?
Absolutely.
Excellent.
Good afternoon.
All right, so you've heard our reaction, you've heard the research, but we really wanted to talk to you because our job is radio. We're on we are, if you like, radio professionals on that side of the industry. But the whole point of this exercise was to understand, was to try and help educate and influence car makers. You are our number one car maker. What do you make of it? What's your initial response?
Frankly speaking, I was surprised. I'm engaged with WorldDAB since my personal opinion is that radio is number one in the car. But seeing this really in numbers of official research with thousands of people per country all over the world and see this consistent view, it really surprises me. So I'm very happy with the results and to see what was coming out of this result.
And Martin, given what you've heard there and seen there, how do you see broadcast radio fitting into that sort of broader media and entertainment landscape in the car dashboard going forward?
So the OEM is not the one who do the choice for the customers. What is the media source? Our task is to offer all relevant sources for our customers, and the customer themselves selects what he or she wants to. So in the past we had the CD player, and we don't sell CD players anymore because it's not relevant. any longer. But radio, and this comes out from the study, from my understanding, very clearly is on the one side a very old technology, but on the other side as relevant as it was ever. So, and this is a key finding for me.
Okay, and Martin, we know that, I mean, I've heard you speak in various settings over the last 2 or 3 years, and you've always come across as, somebody who's personally very interested in radio. And when we spoke to you before we commissioned the research, we were talking about, who is going to be interested in it? And I mean, it was, what you had said to me was, the engineers, the technicians, they're already they're already familiar with radio. But what do we, if we're really to make a difference with this research, what do we need to do with it, and how do we get inside the heads of the car makers more broadly?
Yeah, maybe it's worth to explain that the product strategy is not done by the engineers like me. So the product strategy is done by the car lines and especially by the product marketing teams. And the product marketing teams set their priorities for the next generations of cars and next generations of infotainment systems. And my feeling is that, of course, there is a controversy inside the OEMs. I can only talk about Volkswagen, but there is the question: how important is radio to our customers? And I have these discussions internally frequently, and I think there are some people, and I think this is absolutely valid. They question: is it worth investing in, let's say, old technologies because maybe they think they are not relevant for our customers, which is okay if they are not relevant, but given by the data of this study, we can prove to ourselves this is the most relevant audio source. And if we plan the next generations of our cars, and if we plan the next generations of our infotainment systems, we should control or steer our investments by the given numbers of relevance. And for me, the message is clear: radio, we should not forget about it. We should put all our focus on this because it's number one.
And Martin, having looked at this and the importance of broadcast radio, are there any measures that you think the broadcasters themselves should take in collaboration with you to enhance that experience? What have you got a message for the broadcasters on the back of this to help keep radio central in the dashboard?
Yeah, I think we've not seen all the numbers and all the outcomes of the study yet. I went through the details and have seen some very interesting outcomes. So there was a question of which features do you want to see in the dashboard of your car, and there was the majority said voice control. They said, I want information about the currently played song. I want images from the station, from the show, from the presenter, and I want to have access to more episodes or podcasts from my favorite radio stations. So all this, I think the OEM cannot do by himself. This is something where the broadcaster need to provide those kinds of information. And I think this fully applies or is in conjunction with our metadata initiative within WorldDAB. And the study just echoes that the customer wants this information and the broadcasters need to supply this information in order to have a great experience in the car.
And just, Martin, following up on that, obviously you're the chair of the WorldDAB Automotive Working Group. And that has members from the car makers and from the broadcasters. I mean, at the moment, from your perspective, are you getting sufficient interest and activity from the broadcasters, or would you like to see more?
I think there are always some broadcasters which are very busy in implementing these features and other which are not so fast. But I think within WorldDAB, our message or our mission is to just explain why the implementing these things like metadata is so crucial for the in-car experience, and within the broadcast industry, it should have the right priority. Like radio should have the right priority on the OEM side as well.
Okay. Lawrence, do you have any more questions?
No, I mean, I think you touched on it there, because I think it seems to me that certainly from a WorldDAB radio player perspective, it's collaboration is at the heart of achieving that, the experience you've just outlined there, Martin, certainly on some of those future features. And do you think you're seeing enough of that? Do you think we could do more in that respect? And do the product marketing guys understand that, I think?
Yeah, I think two questions, two answers. I think the study also brought out features which we don't have at the moment in the car, and where the OEM should have the task to care about them. I have some on my list, like skipping songs was very highly rated. Pause and rewind was very highly rated, and personalized recommendations was very highly rated. So these are all things the OEMs should take for themselves in order for planning new features in the upcoming infotainment system generations. Question number two, I think the most important thing is that we approach the right people in the automotive industry with these results. As you said, Patrick, the engineers, we don't need to convince the engineers, since I think they are convinced. I think we should target the messaging of the results towards the product marketing, towards the product strategy guys in the OEMs, that they get the message, since, you know, as you said, they are not regularly dealing with radio. This is not the core of their job. So how should they know? And a study like this was, as far as I know, not done in the recent years. And the product strategy guys, of course, rely on studies and their results. And I think this is a valuable asset that they can rely on for their job. Now we have these results, and then now we should make sure that the study finds its way to the product marketing and product strategy people, that they can rely on the results for their tasks in the future.
Fantastic.
Brilliant.
Martin, thank you. Really, really valuable to get that feedback. We could talk for hours, you can imagine. We have to stop. I've been told to stop.
As always.
So Martin, thank you. Really, and thank you for your contribution generally. Nikki, back to you.
Brilliant. No,
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely fascinating to hear you know, the three of you talk about it. And I think, it's the question is now, you know, how do we then use that research productively going forward? So a big thank you again once to Martin, Patrick and Lawrence. Now, this is obviously a piece of research that is going to be shared as widely as possible. So with this in mind, for those of you watching, you can download the research results from the WorldDAB website. And alongside it, there is a press release and lots of supporting information. So get the message out there. Drivers love radio in the car right now. And of course, they want to keep radio for the future, which is just a brilliantly positive result. And do keep posting us your questions on the Q&A, because we will have a bit of a session towards the end. So yeah, get them in quickly. Right, so now we're going to move on, because we have a really interesting presentation actually on cars and looking at how to integrate broadcast radio with connectivity into the digital dash. And bringing this to you is Jan Bremer, the Senior Product Marketing Manager, at NXP Semiconductors. Over to you, Jan.
Yeah, welcome everybody. Thanks for the short introduction. In my talk, I will speak about trends which will actually shape the composition of modern infotainment system, and especially what will be the influence of these trends on radio. And I also will try to explain you what NXP as a semiconductor company is actually doing that radio stays as attractive as possible in the car in the future. Before I start, I would like to introduce NXP as a company shortly. So we have a very long history. We are actually a spin-off of Philips. That spin-off took place in 2006. We have operation sites in more than 30 countries worldwide, and we have approximately 29,000 employees. Our headquarters is in the Netherlands, in Eindhoven. And due to the context of this speech, I also would like to emphasize that NXP is the #1 in automotive infotainment systems and the global market and innovation leader for car radio solutions. What are the mega trends that are shaping the automotive future? So one of the biggest mega trend is for sure at the moment autonomous driving, with the ultimate goal to become accident-free. But one interesting side effect is also that the driver in an autonomous car will have much more time to use all the entertainment function and also radio. So that's definitely interesting. And the next mega trend is electrification, with the goal to become oil independent and also to lower the carbon footprint of the passengers. What is also interesting is that there is also challenge for broadcast involved, because all this electric component in the car and also during the charging process, all this can interfere with the broadcast reception, and worst case could even lead to audio loss. And then as a third mega trend, we have connectivity and everything that belongs to this trend. Here I will focus more because this has the strongest impact on infotainment systems and therefore also on radio. In the last few years, we have seen a drastic increase of electronic components in the car. So modern high-end cars, more than 150 ECUs, electronic control units, are integrated. So these are small computers. In the middle of the slide, you can see a schematic of a car, and just some of these ECUs are sketched. And in green, it's highlighted. The infotainment system is one of these ECUs and one of the most important. The number of the electronic components in the car is steadily increasing. So to show that a little bit more, or to explain that a little bit more, I've copied a study result from a study that was carried out lately by McKinsey and Company. It shows the market growth for automotive software and electrical components from 2020 to 2030 in billion US dollar. And in 2020, the market size was 238 billion, and it will grow to 469 billion US dollars in 2030. So that's a tremendous growth, which are mainly driven by these mega trends I've just presented. And the main challenge for the automotive, for the car manufacturers, is actually to manage the cost, to manage that the cost stays stable, to also manage the power consumption of all these additional components and the weight of the car. Just to explain a little bit more, an average car buyer will not be willing to spend 20 or 30% more for a mid-end car because you have now 2 or 3 or 4 more electronic components or functions in the car. Radio is still a core function of modern infotainment systems, but it already competes and will compete with more and more features entering the car. To show that a little bit, I've sketched the cycle here with the main components of an infotainment system 5 to 10 years ago. Radio was the core function. As you can see here, analog and digital radio. Then there was CD, compact disc, and maybe USB connection for plugging in your MP3 player or your phone. But radio was the core function. So what trends do we have currently that are shaping how modern infotainment systems are built up? So we have the seamless integration of smart devices. That is one of the main trends. We see that multiple and larger displays are entering the cars or have already entered. Good examples are the hyperscreen of Daimler, for example, or this multiple infotainment system of the Honda E, and there are much more good examples. Then over-the-air updates of all features and functions is a very important trend. In-car voice assistants have become much better in the last few years, mainly because they are now can use artificial intelligence enabled algorithms. Media access from all various sources, so from streaming, gaming over 4G and 5G, cloud access, broadcast, hybrid radio also falls into this trend here. Then advanced audio experience. What we have seen in the last few years is that more and more smart audio algorithms or software is entering the car. Just to give you some examples, there are software audio algorithms which actually can cancel the noise generated by your tires on the road or the engine inside the cabin, or you have in-car communication algorithms which amplifies the voice of the driver so that he has not to turn his head to speak to the people on the rear seats, or sound enhancement or branded audio. These are all things that are more and more enter the car and become more important. And last, personalization of the user interface is also a very important trend. How do these trends shape the infotainment system? To show you that, I've sketched this cycle now. What are the main components of modern infotainment systems? So we have the connectivity modules, Wi-Fi, LTE, GPS, and Bluetooth. We have multiple displays. Most of them are high resolution touchscreens. The instrument cluster has become digital. We see head-up displays coming to the car, some of them augmented reality enabled. We have digital signal processors, graphical processing units in the car that are driving the displays and to support all these audio functions I've just mentioned, and multiple in-vehicle sensors, proximity sensors, gesture sensors, light sensors, and camera, and of course, analog and digital tuners for multi-standard radio reception. But if you compare the cycle left to the cycle right, you can easily see that radio is still a core function, but it competes with more and more features. The good thing is we have just seen in the research of results of Edison and also in the research results of the Infinite Dial 2021, which was also carried out by Edison Research, that radio is still the main audio source passengers are listening to in the cars. So that's very good. And radio has one big advantage compared to all the other audio sources. It's more than music, it's actually entertainment. So the content is curated, you have DJs selecting the music, you have moderators, it's filtered, so it's relevant, it's live, it creates a local community feeling, and it's easy to use. So it's actually one-click infotainment. But it's not the time to lay back now and say, yeah, look, radio is the audio source #1, that's good. No, actually, we have to step up, or radio has to step up, because it needs to provide more than just audio to stay also over the next 5 to 10 years as attractive as it is at the moment. So unified station list, for example, has to become the de facto standards in cars. Seamless blending of analog, digital, and IP radio is a must. We have to work on to enhance the radio experience with digital radio and IP services like album art, station logos, lyrics. We need more attractive visual content for the large screens, which are now available. It's important that the user experience can be personalized. Radio has to make the best out of voice control, and integration of extra services is also very important, like podcasts and more background information. And as I mentioned, for these electric vehicles, it's also very important that we have a reliable performance of radio in the car, even in harsh environments. And we also have to work on that we always deliver the best quality, so advanced audio quality. On this slide, I would like to explain you what NXP as a semiconductor company is doing, or is doing to support that radio stays attractive in the future. So we are working hard to optimize the costs of our customers and also for the car manufacturers by integrating more and more functions. So in our radio ICs, we have integrated audio DSPs, digital signal processors, to support all these audio software and audio algorithms which are entering the car. Our ICs are actually digital radio and analog radio capable in one IC to save costs. And we have not only the radio firmware, but we also deliver radio software, so radio control software, which can run on our ICs. In our latest ICs, we have also integrated more and more tuners in one hardware and one IC to also support advanced radio use cases around the world. And our ICs are global turnkey radio solutions. We are actually using software-defined radio technology. And with that, we are able that with one hardware, we can support all major digital radio standards worldwide. And also our functions and features can be enabled and disabled via software. And we are also working on optimizing the performance of radio in the car with reception improvement algorithms. We have, for example, an algorithm, or we are working on an algorithm to suppress the noise for analog and digital radio bands, especially for electric vehicles or in electric vehicles. And we have released a reception improvement algorithm to increase the reception radius for DAB. We have a very sophisticated seamless blending algorithm available for analog, digital, and IP radio. And our latest ICs use wideband tuners, which are able to digitize the complete RF signal, which means we have actually access to the complete RF signal in the digital domain. And this allows us to apply smart algorithms, smart processing. And we are continuously adding features. For example, audio features. We are working with a very vast network of partners, and we have a complete portfolio of audio features which can run on our radio ICs, noise cancellation algorithms for road noise, engine noise, in-car communication algorithms, and also audio sound enhancement algorithms. And we offer end-of-line programming to our customers to make the logistics much easier for them. And also we offer over-the-air updates for our firmware. And we work also with partners like Radio DNS to make it more easy to have enhancement with metadata from digital and IP together with our ICs. That brings me actually to my last slide, and I would like to conclude. So in the last few years, we have seen a drastic increase of electronic components in the car. And the main challenge is really that the cost has to stay stable. Radio is the main audio source in the car, but it needs to step up in user interface functionality, content, and audio quality to stay attractive in the future. And NXP commits to optimize the cost, performance, and integration of radio with other functions in its ICs to support the future attractiveness of radio in the car. That was my last slide. I would like to thank you all for your attention and looking forward to answer questions in the Q&A session. Thanks.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, Jan. And I mean, it really does look like the car is going to become even more connected in the future. And of course, broadcasters have got to be ready for the opportunities and some of the threats that may bring. Thank you, Jan, once again. He will be joining us for the Q&A at the end. But finally, in this session, it wouldn't be the WorldDAB Summit without a presentation from the WorldDAB Vice President and CEO of Commercial Radio Australia, Joan Warner, who brings a much broader overview of what broadcasters have to do to thrive in today's digital era. Over to Joan.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Joan Warner, and I'm here to join you for the WorldDAB Virtual Summit. I'm here today to talk to you about the excellent research that we've just heard from Tom Webster and others, the Edison Research on car buyers and their attitude to broadcast radio in cars. I'm going to talk about the Australian stats and a couple of activities we're involved in to try and keep radio prominent and easy to find in car, where a lot of live and local radio listening takes place. So as I said, it's great to be here, and it's a great topic, and we all should be very, very interested in this topic if we want to maintain radio's prominence in the car. You can see from this slide that Australian car buyers are overwhelmingly satisfied with their current broadcast in-car experience. 94% of Australian car buyers want access to radio to remain free. 87% of Australian car buyers believe broadcast radio provides a better listening experience in the car than other types of audio services, including music streaming. And that's great news as we move forward to the digital era. Our own study that we do here, the Infinite Dial 2021, shows 84% of people listen to broadcast radio in the car in the last month. Radio is still well ahead of people who listen to their own music in the car or those who stream online audio content from Spotify or Apple. Car radio is important to drivers in terms of entertainment preference and purchase of vehicle. And with DAB+, car buyers in Australia have been given great sound quality and enormous station choice. Car manufacturers continue to add DAB to their vehicle ranges. Nearly 80% of new vehicles in Australia are currently sold with DAB+, and there's been 4.1 million vehicles sold to date. We've also seen a strong year-on-year sales growth in 2021 of DAB standard cars, up 25% in the first half of the year. But connected cars are coming, and they could change the face of the vehicle industry. Consumers expect that the same sorts of entertainment they can access on their mobile or smartphone will be found in their car. Google and Apple have introduced a car-centric version of their operating system, Android Automotive and Apple CarPlay. It's a very real possibility, unless we are alert and active, that finding free-to-air local broadcast radio easily and quickly on the primary entertainment screen will become more difficult. So how can broadcast radio continue to thrive in the car of the future? The results of the car buyers study show plenty of strong consumer sentiment about the important place of broadcast radio in the car. Radio broadcasters around the world should be engaging with vehicle manufacturers and governments at all levels with the same message. And that message is, it is important for broadcast radio to stay easily accessible in cars of the future. If there's no actual vehicle manufacturing in your country, it's still vital to reach out to the offices of car companies and engage with them about what the consumers and listeners in your market need. CRA has actively engaged with automotive manufacturers for years to ensure the adoption of DAB+. But change is coming, so the process of engagement needs to start all over again. CRA has also called on our federal government to pass regulations that ensure that new and connected cars entering Australia from 2023 onwards have local broadcast radio prominent on the main car entertainment system. In advocating our position with government, we've communicated the key benefits of radio in the car via two very strong messages: reliability in emergencies when the internet crashes, and preserving a local and authentic voice. The car buyer survey tells us that 91% of Australian car listeners regard radio as company in the car. Unlike Spotify or other global media streaming services, only radio can provide this company in a live local voice and offer drivers original and compelling live and local content. DAB+ offers even more choice of stations free over the broadcast, supporting local culture and communities. Radio is a trusted voice in every community. The car buyers survey saw a large majority of Australians, 91%, agree that broadcast radio is an important source of information in a crisis. Radio is often the last channel still working when mobile networks are down or congested during a disaster. Many towns impacted by the devastating recent Black Summer bushfires in Australia had also experienced the closure of print newspapers and local TV hubs. But radio invests and still actively operates across all metropolitan and regional areas in this country. Often it's now likely the only source of local and live news during an emergency. Broadcast radio played a major role in supporting communities during the bushfires by providing timely and relevant information to those at risk. Much of this was received via car radios while people drove to safety, escaping the fast-moving bushfires in their area. I'll just play you a little bit of the local radio audio.
Right along our coast there are bushfires. There are 3 at the moment at emergency warning, and there's also several at watch and act at the moment.
The fire activity is increasing due to deteriorating conditions.
The RFS has confirmed that 2 people missing at Cobargo have lost their lives in these terrible fires.
Fire at Curraway.
That's just a sample of some of the local radio stations across Australia. But as well as advocating to our government, CRA is part of a global group led by the US National Association of Broadcasters. The group's focus is on preserving radio in car and delivering the best possible radio experience for new car owners. The group is providing input on radio in Google's Android Automotive system, and Ford and Volkswagen are very welcome members to that group. Broadcasters have the ability to innovate to maintain relevance in the digital age. In Australia, we've increased the number of radio stations in a market like Sydney from 19 on AM and FM to over 50 on DAB+. This has created a stronger local media industry that's better equipped to compete with digital giants such as Amazon, Spotify and Apple. One device starting to make inroads is, of course, the smart speaker. 26% of Australians now own a smart speaker, and of those, 67% use it every day. Voice technology is a massive area of development, As the leaders in audio, we want to make sure we're using our skills and expertise in content and that we're in on the ground floor of any voice technology developments, particularly in car. Australian radio is leading the world in forming partnerships with Google and Amazon Alexa to enable radio on voice-assisted smart speakers. This allows listeners to simply ask their Google Nest to play a radio station by name and for it to play the right station. It works with over 400 Australian radio stations. It's also important as broadcasters to provide both car manufacturers and governments with accurate and interesting information on our audiences, so they know that people are listening in car. They know how many people are listening in car, and they know how much time they're spending listening in car. So radio ratings and surveys really need to be upgraded to enable them to capture all of this data. We worked with digital data leader GfK to develop a multi-million-dollar hybrid measurement system, which we announced a few weeks ago. Radio 360 will use a range of tools to capture radio listening everywhere and accurately report it. It was successfully launched and received very warmly by our advertising stakeholders. So in summing up, we can't just sit on our hands. We've got to be out there. We've got to be talking. We've got to be talking about the importance of radio and in particular, broadcast radio. Radio can't be passive passengers during the journey towards the connected car. Find the vehicle manufacturers' contacts in your country and reach out to them. Spread the word about the importance of broadcast radio. Lobby your governments for further regulations to enable broadcast radio to easily be found in new and connected cars and be on tap and easy to access in those times of emergency and times of trouble. We've just heard some fantastic research, and that's going to be a great tool for us in talking with our governments and with vehicle manufacturers. Let's make sure we use it and we use it wherever we can. So I hope you enjoy the rest of the day at the WorldDAB Summit. I'm sure there's lots of other interesting sessions that you'll be hearing, and I look forward to getting some feedback and hearing about all the other great things that you talk about, even though we're not there in person. So have a great day and see you soon. Bye.
Well, thank you very much, Joan. Some really insightful and compelling figures there and advice as well along the way. And actually, if you haven't heard, this is going to be Joan's last summit. So we and all the team and members of WorldDAB wish her well and a very successful future. Thank you very much to Joan. So now it is time to answer all of your questions. So let's bring back Patrick, Lawrence, Tom and Martin. Combination of in the studio and all around the world. So let's kick it off. We have a question. Actually, this is from Keith Briggs, and this is probably actually one for you, Martin. He says he's just purchased a Seat Ateca. Very nice car. But when he plugs it in, it automatically when he plugs in his iPhone, it automatically switches to Apple CarPlay, and that's fine. However, it's not always that obvious how to switch back to radio once it's in this mode. What can we do about problems like that?
This is a very detailed question. Maybe he should give me a call afterwards in order to find out if we can fix this. But this is true. So I think when it comes to radio experience, it's not the pure radio experience we as the OEMs should consider, but it's also like the radio experience is interfered with the other many features we have in our infotainment systems today. So I think our mission is to make sure that radio works fantastically with CarPlay on and CarPlay off, as well as it works with Android Automotive on or off.
Absolutely. Well, there you go, Keith. Hopefully that has answered your question for you. This is going to be a question for Tom. Tom, is the data analysed for the different demographics? Good question. This person would be interested to see how it looks like for the younger consumer.
Yeah, I mean, there are some slight differences in demographics. They're not as extreme as you might guess. And, you know, again, we are talking about in-car usage. We're talking about prospective and recent car buyers. And when you get numbers that strong across the board, I mean, many of the numbers that we saw were in the 80 and 90% in terms of favorability about radio and its use in the car. When you get numbers like that, then you're going to have agreement across all demographics, largely. So I think really the message here is just how vibrant and how, taken for granted is a bit of a strong word, but I think when people are reminded about it, or when the fear of it being taken away is presented with them, it's then that you really see what an integral part of the driving experience it really is.
Yeah, okay, brilliant. Thank you for that one, Tom. We've got a question now for Jan, and someone would like to know how you see radio broadcasters and collaborators working together, and how is NXP involved in those conversations?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. So NXP is not directly involved in the discussion with the broadcasters, but we actually are involved in all the ecosystem. Like I mentioned, we are part of WorldDAB. We are working closely with Radio DNS. And for sure, we test our radio ICs that it really works with all this metadata, also the blending algorithms and so on. So we really do a lot of field tests also in the different regions, so not only in Europe, but also around the world, to really assure that it really, the look and feel is like it was intended. So this is how we do it.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you. We've actually got another question for Tom. Tom, you're a popular guy today. You've shown us a bit of a snapshot in the data from a fixed point of time. How do you think these findings are going to shift over time?
Well, I think I do have some perspective on that, which is from our share of ear data in the United States. And we've been conducting a quarterly survey in the United States called Share of Ear since 2014. It's the only single source measure of all things audio, online and offline, in the US. And when we focus on the car, I think one of the things that really strikes you is that as more and more technology options are available to people, they have not replaced radio in the car. Radio remains the #1 source of audio in the car, and the percentage of time that we spend listening to radio in the car from 2014 until now has dipped a little bit, but it has not fallen precipitously or cratered or been offset by the percentage of people who have access to this technology in the car. So I think as long as the product is vibrant, as long as the user interface and the technology remains easy to use and free, then it will continue to be a choice. And we see that very strongly in the car research in our share of ear data.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on that. I thought it was interesting because when I was looking at Jan's presentation, there was a similarity. Jan presented a list of things that radio needed to do to remain competitive with regards to functionality and features. And I thought it was interesting because that was very similar to the list of features that we had in the car buyers study. Yeah. And so I think there's a bit of a call to arms there for the industry, for radio and broadcast radio to remain competitive, because there's a lot of similarity there. Voice, we're talking about metadata, we're talking about the visual experience, we're talking about personalisation, podcasts and on demand. So I think just building on what Tom was saying, I think there is something that all of us, within WorldDAB and other organisations need to focus on, just to make sure that radio retains that strong position we have at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. We do have one quick final question from Paddy O'Reilly, and he wants to know, is the survey going to be available at the end of this summit? I know the answer to that question, and it's a yes. There will actually be an email landing in your inbox in literally a few moments' time, so do look out for it, and please do share it with all of your colleagues. Paddy's from Jaguar Land Rover, so do share it amongst your colleagues. I'm sure they'll be interested in reading the research. Well, that kind of draws this session to a bit of a close. Gentlemen, thank you so much. It's been really, really fascinating to hear all of the stats and the research that we've obviously been discussing. But we do have one more session for you guys before we finish this year's WorldDAB Summit. So don't go anywhere. We will have a short break and we'll be back in a couple of minutes. Thanks.